Thank you so much for coming. I'm super excited that we get to have this event in public because we've actually been having a closed event all week. And it's amazing whenever we can share what we're working on and what we're doing with the community in Madison. So welcome. My name is Dekila Chungyalpa. I'm the founder and director of the Loka Initiative, which is housed at the Center for Healthy Minds at UW-Madison. And I'm really excited to have this panel because I just realized, without thinking, I flanked the panel with two of the three people that brought me to UW-Madison, Dr. Jonathan Patz and Dr. Richie Davidson. And so they have been at the heart of the Loka Initiative from the very beginning. So what is Loka? Loka is an outreach and capacity building program at UW-Madison for faith leaders, religious leaders, and indigenous leaders who work on environmental and climate issues. And the whole goal of Loka is that we provide resources and serve this group of leaders that are embedded in community and that are dedicated to solving environmental and climate problems, right? These are the people the community turns to. These are the people that in times of problems, this is who the community turns to. These are the people that have the trust of the community. And maybe most importantly, these are the people that speak the language of hope. And so many of us in the environmental and climate science world struggle with all of these things. We are in a time of polarization where trust is being eroded in front of our eyes, especially for science, right? We are in a time where we ourselves are struggling to figure out how to activate people because the information we are holding is so filled with despair. We are the people that often are seen as alien in the communities we are trying hardest to influence. So for us, working with faith leaders should actually be a no-brainer. For us, working with faith leaders should be the exact gift we need moving forward. And yet there are so few places in academic areas, in the science world, and in the mainstream environmental and climate world that make space for faith leaders and culture keepers of indigenous traditions. And this is why I gave a shout out to Jonathan and to Richie, because these are two people that really believed in this vision along with me and invited me to UW-Madison to create this platform. So whenever I speak to people who are scientists or policymakers who are not people of faith, and they ask me to explain why is faith important to the movement, I always fall back on numbers. So I say things like, 85% of the human population subscribes to a religion. They are the largest stakeholder group. Or that world religions run over 50% of all schools worldwide. Or 8% of all arable land. So all land that is dedicated to food production is owned by faith institutions. Or the second wealthiest property owner in the world is the Catholic Church. Guess how many buildings it owns in the United States alone? Over 12,000 buildings, right? There are all these really practical reasons for why we should be working with faith leaders and see them as a major stakeholder group in the environmental and climate cause. But at the heart of it, the reason why I work with faith leaders is because we are at a point of crisis. And the crisis is one of values. And we, I'm sorry to say, in the science world, don't know how to speak the language of values. We have moved so far away from that area of being and that area of thinking. And so for me to meet Richie in particular, who's comfortable in this space, who studies this space, who's dedicated his life to human flourishing, it really has been this magical place of growth to be at the Center for Healthy Minds. So this is my way of introducing Richie. Most of you know him. He's the founder and director for the Center for Healthy Minds here. He is the William James and Vilas Research Professor for Psychology and Psychiatry. He's one of the world's leading neuroscientists on human flourishing. And it's amazing that he's here, and I know he's going to have to step out halfway, so I'm excusing him on behalf of all of us. I'm taking a moment because he has a brand new book that just got launched, and he has to go to his book launch party. And the book is called Born to Flourish. And I think it's going to be so important for all of us to actually put that on our reading list. Richie, can you kick us off a little bit? Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dekila, and thank you all. And I especially wish to thank all of those faith leaders who are participating in the Keeping the Faith convening that has been ongoing through the Loka Initiative. It's really an honor and a moral obligation, I feel, for us to house the Loka Initiative, to support the Loka Initiative within the Center for Healthy Minds. The mission of our center is to cultivate well-being and relieve suffering through a scientific understanding of the mind. And one of the key pillars of well-being in our framework is connection. And when we think of connection, we think not only of how we are deeply interconnected with one another, but also how we are deeply interconnected with our environment, with the planet, with our place. And well-being is in part governed by our relationship with the land, with our context, with our environment. And the true experience of interdependence, which is something that we seek to cultivate in the kinds of practices that we study to cultivate well-being, the experience of interdependence really is about becoming more wise and mindful with respect to the extraordinary opportunity and honor that we have to be inhabitants of this planet and to care for it in the ways that really it's calling to be cared for. And one of the aspirations of the kind of work we do is to help to promote a kind of vitality and resilience, because people, particularly young people today, are experiencing a kind of existential eco-anxiety in response to the climate crisis. And it's really essential for social change agents to not burn out. Burnout is so prevalent in these groups, and to have people with the vitality that is going to be necessary to bring about the transformation that I think we all are seeking. And so this is one of the important missions of the work we're doing, and one of the things that is ongoing within the Loka Initiative in collaboration with other parts of the Center for Healthy Minds is to really work on this problem of eco-anxiety and cultivating resilience in this era of the Anthropocene. Another really important issue which really gets at the heart of the connection between faith traditions and science is really about this quality of interdependence, the experience of interdependence. It's something that faith traditions in their own ways promote, and we believe it may be essential for facilitating better ecological intelligence, more skillful ecological decision-making. These are really essential questions that are being investigated today. So one of the things that Dekila mentioned is that 85% of the world's population identifies as being a member of a particular faith tradition. And this is something that the Dalai Lama reminds us of every time we see him. 85% of people. Given this fact, not to engage with faith communities is really irresponsible. And so I view this work as an absolute necessity, and the practical strategies that Loka is developing to actually develop projects within local communities to center the specific issues that are of concern to the local communities is just brilliant, and I think is one of the most effective grassroots strategies for improving our overall ecological intelligence and sense of belonging. So it's really with a deep bow of gratitude, a lot of humility in the face of the enormous work that they're doing. And I know I've witnessed some unbelievable gatherings that Dekila has managed to pull off with some members of faith communities whose congregations may not be so supportive of their engagement with this kind of initiative and with science more generally. And so it's really a testament to Dekila's courage, her tenacity, that we're all gathered here today. And so I'm really thrilled to play a tiny role in this, and I look forward to this conversation. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Richie. So I guess the question to begin us off with, and just to take a moment to situate ourselves, is, well, why are we here, right? Why have we gathered together as a community? And the way Loka approaches the work we do with faith leaders is actually to work specifically with one faith group at a time. We're really clear, our idea of interfaith is not a mishmash, right? It's not a pan-faith or pan-religious approach. We actually spend time building trust with different faith communities and really investing in that work. But over the years, we also have been inundated with questions and requests from different faith leaders asking for support. And so in the end, as a response to this question that we've been getting from the community, we created a course called Preparing Religious Environmental Planning Projects called PREP for short. And for the last 10 weeks online, we've been running this course, and we have about, I think, almost 30 faith leaders in the room that have been taking this course. Now, this course is not a typical environmental and faith course. This is a course that really is training faith leaders to design their environmental and climate projects from the ground up, from the community, right? It's very community-based. So some of you will really know this by heart, like what a SWOT is, right? So our faith leaders are learning to do SWOT. They're doing stakeholder analyses. They are doing threats-based assessments. And this is the group that's in the room. And so we requested a few of them to just come on to the podium and speak a little bit representing different faiths, because the leaders you see here have been doing this work for 20 plus years, already in the community with very little support. And I've known them for a very long time. Some of them helped me get Loka off ground. So I'm gonna do a quick round of introductions, and I have them alphabetically, so I'm gonna jump around and request that you raise your hand as I introduce you. The first person I'm going to mention is Huda Alkaff. Huda is the founder and director of Wisconsin Green Muslims, and now Michigan Green Muslims, grassroots environmental justice groups in our region, connecting faith, environmental justice, and sustainability. She has won so many awards, I can't mention all of them, but one I will is the White House Champion for Change by President Obama. Did you raise your hand, Huda? You did. So Huda actually was one of my key advisors when I was designing the Loka Initiative, and so is the next person. Reverend Dr. Ambrose Carroll is the founder and the director for Green the Church, which is the premier organization in the US that is right at the intersection of the Black faith community and environmental justice. He is also senior pastor at Renewal Worship Center in Oakland. He's one of the nation's leading practical theologians, combines faith, ecology, and social justice to do this incredible transformation in the Black church in particular. Dear friend of mine, hi Ambrose, thank you so much for being here. Third person, Reverend Kendra Ford. Kendra gives me so much hope because I went the other way. You know, I went from science to faith, and Kendra came from faith to science. Kendra was the minister for the Unitarian Universalist congregation in New Hampshire for 21 years, and then gave it up and joined 350.org, and now works in 350 New Hampshire on climate justice. And one of my favorite things that I resonate with Kendra is we both talk about water as teacher, and that's incredibly powerful. Reverend Dr. Ben Lowe. So I knew of Ben before I met Ben, like 15 years ago, because Ben is one of the founding national organizers for an organization called Young Evangelicals for Climate Action, YECA. YECA gave me so much inspiration and hope. Ben is an evangelical minister. He's also an environmental scientist. He is the executive director for Arusha USA, and Ben and I have been trying to work together for a decade and a half, and we're finally doing it now. So it's incredible to have him here. I'm going to introduce Dr. Jonathan Paz. We don't need an introduction, but I'm going to do it as quickly as I can. Viola's Distinguished Achievement Professor, John P. Holton Endowed Chair of Health and Environment. Jonathan's been working on climate health since, the mid-90s, 1990s, I think. He convened the first ever session on climate change with the American Public Health Association. He has been lead author for IPCC, so the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the reports for 15 years. And that is the organization that won the Nobel Prize in 2007, along with Al Gore. So thank you for being here, Jonathan. And the final person I'm going to introduce is Fra Woot. Fra Woot is a Theravada monk. He was ordained in 2011, and he has a PhD in peace studies from Mahachula University in Thailand. And I worked with Mahachula 15 years ago, so Fra Woot and I know a lot of people. And he has been working to integrate Buddhist wisdom with peacekeeping and sustainable development, and is here representing the Interreligious Council of Thailand. So this gives you an example of how religions have been showing up on environmental and climate issues for decades. And now the question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we meeting them where they are? Are we, in the universities we're in the institutions and organizations and movements that we're in, are we meeting them where they've been all along? And so this is the question that I want the scientists in the room to take away with them when they leave. And I'm going to start us off by asking Jonathan a question. Jonathan, would you tell us why faith leadership is important to climate change from your perspective?
Sure thing, Dekila, and it's an honor to be with such leaders up here at the front of the room. And I'm a little upset with you for saying how long I've been working on climate change. It does go back 30 years, and I say that, so I'm an environmental health scientist, and the reason I dedicated my career to climate change is because I saw how many ways climate change can impact our human health and our well-being. And so I jumped in with both feet. And I think that right now, after studying this for so long and seeing the health impacts, but also the health opportunities of climate action that I'll talk about in a second, that we are at a critical point in time where we absolutely need faith leaders to collaborate, to step forward, and to lead the dialogue. We are at the, right now, we know, especially in the United States, that all scientific progress on climate change has been ground to a halt. The Inflation Reduction Act, the largest investment in clean energy, has been frozen. And so we need many voices to step forward to help out and to carry the message. A couple of things related to faith that is important with climate change is an obvious one of stewardship and values. That across all faiths, we understand that caring for each other means caring for natural resources upon which our health and well-being depends. And that means stabilizing the climate, reducing fossil fuel emissions. So the stewardship and values is, you all know this better than I do, but I'll just pin that as one key rationale for faith leaders to bring that to the table. The other one is vulnerable populations. And there are some big equity issues regarding those most vulnerable to the risk of extreme weather compared to those who caused the problem to begin with. And the United States is the #1 most responsible country historically for causing today's climate change. The other aspect with vulnerable populations regards equity across generations. And right now we're seeing more evidence that wildfire smoke is dangerous to the unborn child. And this is something that is becoming worse and something that is very, it's an equity challenge. And of course, we're in a globalized world, we're connected all over the place, and that harms anywhere in the world will affect everyone in the world. So I mentioned that, historically, the United States has responsibility. We've put out the most emissions. I remember when His Holiness, when I first met Dekila in 2011 at a meeting with the Dalai Lama, he said, so if your country understands that this pollution is harming people around the world, you're not showing much compassion. And I said to him, I would get back to him about that. And it made me think about, well, why aren't we the #1 most responsible country for causing climate change? Why aren't we doing something about it? And just as the Dalai Lama triggered Richie Davidson a long time ago to study mindfulness and happiness, that in exchange got me to start thinking about the other side of the equation, which is, oh my gosh, if we were to reduce fossil fuel emissions, how many millions of people would we save from better air quality, healthier plant-forward diets, and cities built for people instead of for cars, where people are exercising and getting around by bicycle and walking. And so it's a message of hope that climate action from a health point of view offers enormous benefits. And we're talking tens of millions of lives saved every year from improved air quality, better food, and better cities. So I want to, finally, I want to just talk about the urgency of now and the current deprioritization of science and scientific evidence. And it opens an enormous gap that needs to be filled. Let me give you an example. Last month, the endangerment finding, a finding that the Supreme Court made in 2007 and reinforced by assessment of the EPA in 2009, that climate change endangers human health. There's enough scientific evidence to say that. That's been the ruling for the last 16 years, that EPA is supposed to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, but this new EPA has repealed that. First, they based this on scientific uncertainty, and when many of us stepped forward, including the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, to say, rubbish, there is plenty of scientific evidence, there is much more than there was in 2009, the EPA changed their mind and said, well, let's punt on the science and just say that it's from a bad rulemaking back in 2009, and it's another such baloney. So we are at a time where science is not regarded by decision makers as having any role in decision making. And it's that much more important for faith leaders who understand the evidence to step forward, to be in front of the narrative, and especially now where it's critical, where decisions are being made not based on science, based on anything but science. We need you now more than ever.
As I said, the faith leaders that are up here have been doing this work for a really long time, and I thought maybe it will be valuable for us as a community to hear about why they do this. Why do you do this work? And how is that connected to your religious worldview or your faith tradition? And how do you think faith leaders should be leading in this time of ecological and climate crisis? So maybe I'll start with you, Ben, and we can go down.
Sure. It's really good to be with you all. Thank you for caring about these issues, and thank you for caring about our communities. And thank you so much for the wonderful hospitality that the Loka Initiative and Center for Healthy Minds has provided for our traditions over the years. It's been a joy and a gift to be partners with you all in this important work that brings us together at a time when there are many things that can divide us. So I hope we don't take this for granted. You identified me as an evangelical Christian, which is a risky thing to do these days because evangelicals are known for causing a lot of problems. But I would say that I am involved in this work and have been for over 20 years now, not in spite of my faith commitments, but precisely because I am a Christian. And I believe, as our tradition teaches us, as our scriptures teach us, even if you don't always see it reflected in how people who identify as Christians or evangelicals may be living or voting, but we believe that this is God's world and it was made to flourish. So I really appreciate the title of your upcoming book, and congrats again on that. These days, we often get into lots of debates around what the world centers on and how we should value it. Is the world centered on humans? So do we take more of an anthropocentric worldview, right, where our needs, our interests, our desires are at the center? Or are we one of numerous species, and do we have to account for, does the world really center on all of creation, or on ecosystems, or on life itself, or what do you put at the center of the universe? And then we get into these conflicts between these different approaches. And one thing that I really value about my faith tradition is I think it provides us with some resources to transcend and reframe that really tough tension and conflict, because we understand, we're taught that the world doesn't center on us as a single species, nor does it ultimately center on a different species, but it centers on God, who is the creator of all. And so that would be not an anthropocentric or an ecocentric or a biocentric, and certainly not an egocentric or a personality self-centered worldview, right? But a theocentric approach. And this doesn't resolve all of our problems overnight, but it gives us a framework to step beyond the current tug of war between those perspectives. And I think, well, if this world was made by a creator who loves it, who sustains it, who is still actively involved in this world, then shouldn't we be asking, what does the creator want of this world? What does the creator want of us as beings that inhabit this world together? And when it comes to those questions, the Hebrew scriptures, the Christian scriptures, there are so many resources that help us to unpack that in ways that are very different than what we see happening around the world today. So that picks up another thing that you said, Dekila, which I completely affirm at the beginning, which is that at the end of the day, environmental crises, climate change, these aren't just scientific or technical or tactical or political or economic problems. At the end of the day, those are symptoms of deeper root problems. The real ultimate threats facing the environment today are things like that other people have named, like greed and apathy and selfishness and pride. And so whatever tradition we're coming from, whatever our vocational calling or role is in society, if we're working together to make the world a better place for everybody and everything to flourish, then really what we're working to do is to find solutions to the problems of these moral ills, what as a Christian I understand to be the problem of sin. And here's the catch though, I can't barely fix myself. And I've been trying. I'm trying to be a good person. But there is brokenness in me that, I mean, I can make progress some days, right? I hope. But at the end of the day, I need help beyond myself, right? And so that's where I find great hope and encouragement and reassurance that I'm not in this on my own, that we have one another to work with, and that we have a God who loves this world, who made it, and who is very much still committed to it. The last thing I'll say at this point is in ecological economics, environmental economics, we have a term called willingness to pay, WTP. It's a way we value things that are hard to value in economic terms. So what's the value of a wetland? Well, what's someone willing to pay to protect it from being turned into a parking lot, right? So then you can value it in that way. In Christian teaching, in biblical teaching, we believe that God so loves the world, that God came to the world, God's self. God came, the Creator became a creature in order that the Creator might be part of reconciling, restoring, and redeeming all that we have done to break what the Creator has made. The creation is so valuable that God was willing to pay with God's own life to save it.
Fantastic, fantastic. So glad to be here. Thank you. Let's thank Dekila. Let's just put our hands together for her one more time. Thank you so much. Amen. She is Queen of Leader. I would follow her into battle anytime. Again, so very glad to be here and just amongst so many of you. I believe that some of the answers to the greatest questions, some of the leaders of the environmental and sustainability movement are right here in this room. Let's put our hands together for all of us today. Right here in this room, what the divine is pouring into us, what science is saying, I think is beautiful. Let me see if I can do this in a Baptist 5 minutes. And I'm going to talk about it. It'll be kind of environmental, sustainable, but I won't pull out those parts. You all have to find them along the way. My dad, the late Reverend Ben Carroll, pastored the First Baptist Church in St. Louis, Missouri. It's one of the oldest Black Baptist churches west of the Mississippi River. But he was from Louisiana. We're like one generation out of the woods. And the Black church is many things. Some are great storefronts. Some are great cathedrals. Many are storefronts. Some have deep theologically educated leadership like the Martin Kings and others. And some, just kind of picked it up and were charismatic and had some folk following them, So it is many different things. But when my dad went to St. Louis, he used the word in terms of ministry of doing holistic ministry. And so there were people on the streets who were called winos. And in 1970s, if you were Black, you were a wino. If you were white, you were an alcoholic. And so he started right there in front of the First Baptist Church, a bunch of doctors and dentists and lawyers, and he started the Alcoholic Drop-In Center. Amen. This was good for the community because there were people literally in the wintertime freezing in the streets. And these were sometimes men who went to work every day and came home and sat under the tree. And so he created a space for them, very holistic. The tension, of course, is that the people in the pews in the church, this is First Baptist. We're not trying to be associated with some of the things that other people are doing. And so that tension, that kind of what holds us. But the ministry that I saw at 8 and 9 years old was holistic. There was basketball for the youth. Around the corner, was the social service agency that gave lunches in the summertime for the young people. My dad would walk around what was called Bluemont, which was kind of the public housing, and there were the elderly, right? And so how do you take care of your community is really what the church was, apart from just pastoring. I had an opportunity right at the end of COVID to go to Ireland with my friend Dominic Campbell. I was a part of the Atlantic Fellows of Racial Equity. And they had something called Creative Brain Week. It's a global brain health institute at Trinity College in Dublin. And they were, and I'm like, okay, why do you want the kind of the black pastor to come to Brain Week? What's happening? But they talked about, this was right at the beginning of the Ukraine war, and there were individuals from Palestine who had been living in camps, and they were undergoing a lot of trauma. And they were trying to figure out what that trauma was doing to the human brain. And what are things that had to happen to ease that trauma, to give care to individuals in these very stressful spaces. And what we found that people were bringing the children into tents and drawing, right, and doing art projects. And then they were doing dance. And I said, oh, that's why I'm here. I'm saying I can help with that. I'm from West Oakland, California. There's violence. There's murder, and we go to church sometimes because we don't have a psychologist, but we shout and we sing. We do the ring dance. We fall out on the floor, then we get up and we feel better, right? We create clothes for our children so that they can have pageantry. That a lot of things that we do in church are things that help us to cope with the stress and to live our lives. And in the midst of that, even putting our hands in the ground to grow food. All of these things help the human consciousness. Thank you.
It has been such a joy to be in this great, big conversation, a global conversation. A global spiritual conversation. So I'm Unitarian Universalist, and we describe our tradition. There are many ways to describe it as we were Protestant, and we just kept asking questions until we fell off the left side of the Protestant Christian tradition. So one of the gifts that I think our tradition brings to this is that asking of questions. The looking at the information and the asking of questions and looking at what's happening around us and asking questions. And I mean, we've been in conversation. Everyone's asking questions, but I think it is it's part of our religious life to be questioners, which connects us to the scientific method, because it's a method of asking questions. And coming up to the limit of what you know and standing there at the edge. And so I think that religious communities can help people make that walk. What do we understand? What do we know? How can we stand right there at the edge of what we're experiencing and what we can step into? One of the other things that I deal with in my work now, having stepped away from congregational life to grassroots organizing. So I just go around and just talk to everybody about everything, and try to figure out what their piece of the work is. What's your part of climate work? Because there's so many parts, and to help people find their spot where they thrive, and so we can actually build something together. And one of the pieces of work is to do direct action, to be really, really engaged, sometimes pretty confrontive. And the Unitarian Universalist tradition has a really strong piece of that. Henry David Thoreau, you might have read him in a literature class. He did sit on the pond, Walden Pond, But he did also go to jail because he refused to pay taxes to an oppressive state, to a state who was continuing to allow and support slavery. He said, I'm not going to participate in that. I can personally not participate in that kind of violence. So, and I mean, again, every tradition has a piece of that story of resistance. Jesus was teaching that. Buddhism has so much about non-harming, and the teachings of peace in Islam, so that there's this conversation about that among the traditions. But in my work now for climate, that's one of the pieces of Unitarian Universalism that I'm really leaning on, is that it's a spiritual practice. It's a way of engaging the world that's pretty fierce and demands you to be just so open-hearted at the same time. And when we're dealing with something as huge as climate change, as like beyond what we can comprehend for ourselves, to be able to be both fierce and brokenhearted with each other is the only way we'll be able to meet it. So that, I think, is one of the teachings and the gifts from my own tradition, and I have loved the conversation about that all week.
So I begin with the name of Allah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, most merciful. I greet you with the Islamic greeting, Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. It is a duty and obligation for Muslims, on Muslims, to care for earth, our common home. God states in the Quran, chapter 6, verse 165, it is God who has made you viceroys on earth. The earth is mentioned more than 450 times in the Quran, of course for a reason. There's so many lessons and teachings in there. There are approximately more than 1,000 environmental messages in the Quran and the Hadith. It's up to us to see them and learn them. These messages guide Muslims towards care for all God's creatures and the sacred natural gifts, such as water, air, land, light, etc., and food. Some of the Quran chapter titles are the cow, the honey bee, honey-making bees, the light, the ants, the spider, the star, the moon, the iron, the people, the pen, the dawn, the sun, the night, the day, the fig, the elephant, and so much more. There are many stories, ayat, we call them ayat, signs that are around us and within us that we need to ponder. That's what God is asking us always, ponder, think, reflect. You have the capability of doing that. Show me that. And it's our role to do that. Be like a tree. That's in the Quran. That's an instruction for us to be like a tree. What does the tree do? It gives for everyone. Does the tree waste anything? No. I tell the kids, be like a tree. Don't waste anything. Just look at the tree, how much it takes, gives, but no waste whatsoever. Be like a bee, like be in a community like a bee. Produce honey that's that gives cure to the people, to humanity, and pollinate from one plant to the other and just spread love and goodness. All this is instructions in the Quran about doing that and learning from the communities that are around us. So God mentions the grapes, onions, garlic, lentils, and many other plants, fruit, etc. God states in the Quran, chapter 6, verse 141, it is God who produced gardens with trellises and without. and dates, and tilth, and produce of all kinds, and olives and pomegranates, similar in kind and different in variety. Eat of their fruit in their season, but render the dues that are proper on the day that the harvest is gathered. It's always a lesson for us to not postpone paying for what is due and eating in season. In Islam, there are clear teachings and signs about the important, beautiful, and intricate balance of creation. God repeatedly tells us to maintain that balance and not to upset the order in creation. In the Quran, chapter 15, verse 19, God says, "And the earth we have spread out, and thereon mountains firm and immovable, and produce therein all kinds of things in due balance." So al-mizan, the balance, is a key concept in Islam. He instructed us to eat and drink of that which God has provided and permitted, and do not act corruptly, causing mischief on earth. Muslims are advised to be moderate in every aspect of life. In the Quran, chapter 7, verse 31, "O children of Adam," all of us, "eat and drink, but waste not by excess. For God loves not the wasters." And Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, forbade a person to waste water even in performing prayer or washing for prayer on the bank of an abundantly flowing river. So all these teachings are necessary, especially at this time of darkness. It is urgent for us to work for light, love, unity, and justice, to stand up together against hate, division, and racism. I will add war and militarism. We gather to embrace each other in mutual respect, not turning our backs to the most marginalized and vulnerable in our neighborhoods and the world. Yeah, so let's ponder about the signs that are around us and within us, and we have a lot to share, a lot to learn, so let's do that together. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. I would like to begin by pay homage to the Triple Gem, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I'm not sure how many of you have ever stand in front of the big mountain. No need to raise your hand. Just not a little bit is fine. Okay. But what if the mountain became the formings of waste? How many of you experience a mountain of waste? I myself experienced this last year after big flood in Hat Yai, Thailand. And I'm sure that many of you have known the news about this. It may not in Hat Yai in Thailand only, but in many countries. I went there and I saw that, imagine mountain that I have ever heard, ever seen. But that time, it's come from west, from house, from condominium in one place. And it's that mountain settled in the center of the city. Can you imagine how it smells, how it looked like the life of people there? Even I myself don't live there, but only short period that I visit, I explore that it's not worth living for human. I jump into this environmental works by observing kind of like personal things that happen. As a Buddhist monk, I walking for alms in the morning, and people offering food in my bowls. Lately, I receive a lot of plastic bag, which I just throw it away at first. One day later, I just kind of like pop up idea that how many plastic bags that came to me, and I just count and like collect it. And I found that there are only one morning I got more than 20 bags. And imagine if I don't collect, I don't count it, I cannot imagine how many plastic, one single-use plastic that come into me. The concepts of Buddhists that taught us, it's kind of like niyama, it's called like niyama 5. They taught, the Buddha taught in 5 natural laws. One is utu niyam, it means physical laws, climate, season, nature. Second is picha niyam, biological laws, growth, genetics, life. Third, citta niyam, mental laws, thoughts and emotions. Fourth, kamma niyam, action and result. Intention shapes outcome. And 5, dhamma niyam, universal law, impermanent, suffering, and non-self. I just only study that on the scripture. But what really what really happened and attacked me, it's kind of like when we look at only mental or citta, we like look over the physical like things that really happen. It's only look at the scripture, but the roots of problem is called micchaทิฏฐิ, the wrong view, wrong understanding, the belief that humans separated from and superior than nature. So when we see ourselves at a center and exploit the world without gratitude, like a deer eating the bush that hides it from danger, living to its own destruction. So we cannot heal the earth without healing the human mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you. That was incredible. You know, in this time of polarization, I feel like we have been in a huge state of polarization, and we're entering into a period that I think is almost unimaginable. The kind of othering that is being presented to us, right? The kind of othering we are being urged to do. And so for me, the power of bringing all of us together here, for bringing all these religious leaders who are working on environmental issues here together, is to ask this simple question: what is the most important work that religion and science can do together to resolve what we are facing ahead of us? So that could be, some of us think it's the psychological and social crisis that led to the environmental and climate crisis. And then some of us see how the environmental and climate crisis we're in now is leading to further social and political crisis, right? So when we think about that, often we just say it's a poly crisis because it's so complicated. Because it's just such a big topic. But then the question becomes, well, what does religion and science, what can we do together? And so I'm gonna ask Richie to kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your beautiful sharing. I certainly come here not as an expert in religion and science, although it has been something that has been part of my life, professional life from the very beginning. And it is, I think, really unfortunate for both religion and science that these two great magisteria have been so disconnected, because they are so complementary and I think intimately related as two great systems of knowing about our world, about the universe. On a more practical level, there's something that I think that every religious tradition provides, which is a set of values and a worldview for its adherents to live by. And this is something that has played an extraordinarily important role. And from the perspective of the way we think about it in behavioral science and in neuroscience, what these religious traditions are providing is a kind of mindset. It's a way, it's a set of beliefs about the world, a set of values to live by. And one of the things that we're discovering is the power of mindset in shaping our perception, shaping our decision-making, and having really amazingly outsized impact on our behavior. And so there are actually a set of amazing studies that have been done with youth, for example, in adolescence, where they have been invited to adopt a different mindset about community, invited to reflect on values beyond themselves, transcendent values. These are the kind of values that every religious tradition provides in one way or another, and examine the impact of that kind of reflection on their subsequent experience and behavior. And it's really remarkable how influential that can be. In fact, there's a famous paper that was published in a very, very high-profile scientific journal showing that 15-year-old adolescents from low-income families in the Northeast of the United States, given a 40-minute intervention, 4 10-minute sessions over the course of a year to reflect on transcendent values, significantly influenced their likelihood of graduating from a 4-year college 7 years later. That's kind of mind-blowing. And so I think that we can harness the power of the religious and spiritual traditions and harness the values that are being offered in ways that I think will help us to get out of the mess that we've created. So that is my aspiration.
Thank you.
Same question. Thank you for that very generous response, Richie. I'd like to offer a thought on why I think science is so important for religion, which is that we cannot practice virtue without skill. I come from the state of Florida right now, where we have tried to geoengineer our entire way of being down there, and we're paying such tremendous costs for what we've done to our water flows and how we're trying to reverse a lot of that damage at the moment. So you cannot practice virtue without skill. It's one thing to believe something is important and valuable and worthy of love, and it's another thing to know how to love it well. Because good intentions can still lead to disastrous outcomes, as we know. So science is very important to religion. And this kind of Western mindset of dualistic thinking that comes out of the Enlightenment, or that was really magnified through the Enlightenment, where we have a lot of these either-ors, either science or religion, either people or nature, that has to go away, right? And I think a lot of our traditions offer resources for bringing those two together. I know that's a very big theme throughout Christianity. When I'm overwhelmed by the poly crisis, which can, because it's my job to work on the polycrisis, it can happen quite often. What I've learned to try to do, and I'm not in this by myself, right? I'm working on this with many of you all, with our team. I have a spiritual director, and she's brilliant and helps keep me grounded and centered. And so I'm using all the resources and medical science and counseling, everything that we can leverage to show up well in the world and to flourish. But one thing I've learned is when I'm really discouraged and despairing of the world, oftentimes I realize I've been spending a lot of time on my screen, and I need to get out. And I go out somewhere where I'm surrounded less by the things that human hands have built, as beautiful and magnificent as they can be, and more by the things that has been built or created without our agency and without our direct involvement. So I go, sit on the side of a mountain surrounded by trees, and I watch and I pay attention to the birds and the pollinators and so on and so forth, and the little roly-polies at my feet. And something happens. You described a little bit about what's happening, but I remember a couple things that are really important to me. And the first is that I am part of a much bigger story that has gone on for so many generations, at which I am just showing up at this very point, but there's something much bigger than I'm part of, and that humility helps recenter me, right? And then the second thing I remember is there is so much good left in this world, and dang it, it is worth fighting for.
Thank you. Can you restate the question?
What is the most important work that religion and science can take on together to resolve the poly crisis? Small question.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in a place where, as my colleagues said, they kept asking questions, they ended up on the left. Our young people are asking questions today that we didn't grow up asking. And, being a Black Baptist pastor, we were kind of the griot, right? Like, we grew up doing a lot of training, Baptist Training Union, right? We did a lot of teaching, a lot of indoctrination, which is really the religiosity. Well, part of the issue now is, you ask if religion and science, a lot of our masses, don't tell anybody out of this room, but we don't have the people the way we used to, you see. We used to have the mothers and the daughters and the sons, and everybody was in church. We were singing "Oh Happy Day." We had choirs with 100 people in it. So things have changed a little bit. Somebody said, thinking about leadership, oh, there go my people. Let me get in front of them to lead them. The reality of our people is that the notions of spirituality, the notions of learning, we talk about science and spirituality as though they are different. In the beginning, it was not so. Maybe two sides of the same coin. But the knowledge, the knowing, I think you use that word, it's a powerful knowing. It's a powerful word to think about knowledge and knowing. And sometimes we see that juxtaposed to faith, like things unseen and unknown. So I think I'm grappling with, how do we connect with our communities in a way with this next generation? Like, they know things now that I learned in seminary, but when I got back to church, I didn't preach it. So now, how do we connect with those scientific, historically, archaeologically relevant things and questions that these young people are having? And how do we give them the okay light to think, to grow, right? Some people say, I was with my dentist the other day and my daughter went off to college. She said, be careful, because when them children go to college, they stop believing, right, in the indoctrination. So we're wrestling with that, I think, because sometimes to make that connection, it is opposite our training. And in some of our religious spaces and places, I often say I'm Baptist, but I'm not German, right? that I've been indoctrinated into a place, but my spirituality center is much bigger. And in order to make the kind of connection that you're talking about, some of us may end up moving to the left. Oh.
I mean, I think that's one of the definitions of a liberal religion, which is that it's open to reinterpretation, that you can ask the question and understand it new. Liberal has lots of definitions, but that's a sort of fundamental one, that it's you can read it again. But that was not the question. The question was, so I was raised by scientists, so I know this separation isn't. It's a wandering path in my personal experience of it. My father's a research chemist. My mother's a nurse, public health. So I knew that science was this asking of questions, and I knew that science was taking care of your people. And so, you know, my religious life is that too. It's making sure that the people are tended to and healthy, and that it's a place where you can go to wrestle with the questions, all the questions. And so I think that kind of tending and wrestling is what we need now as a shared practice. I also think that science is saying, aha, about some things that indigenous folks have known for a little longer. But it is to have that exchange now, like, oh, what you said was, okay. But to be able to say it in another language, to be able to, you know, kind of return to that knowledge and say it again, to bring it through another set of understanding, it is a gift of exchange and deepening that I think lets us meet the climate crisis in a new way. I mean, the book I think of always is Braiding Sweetgrass, but I know there are many thinkers and texts who bring those two kinds of knowledge together in a kind of revelatory way. The other thing is, one of the practices I do is a deep time exercise, which is to remember that it's not just right now, that you can put yourself back thousands of years and forward 7 generations. And that sense of time is both religious and a scientific exercise. And I think that is another thing that lets us engage the climate crisis differently.
All right, so I like this question because I live it. I've been living it now since I graduated. So I started having double major, biology and chemistry, and I was not happy with that, so they don't talk to each other, those two departments. So I went ahead and found ecology, which is the science of interconnections and interdependency. I said, yes, that's where I belong. And so I graduated with the conservation, ecology, and sustainable development degree. And then I went to said, no, I want to find more, which is systems ecology, which is looking at the interconnections and the parts and the patterns and the feedback loops and all that. But then I said, well, where is faith? I'm a Muslim, and I want to see my faith represented in the system that I deal with. And so I said, no, faith must be in there. So that's where I come in here. I bridge both faith and ecology. I've been doing that for quite some time in all the work that we do. I always bring the narrative, the spiritual narrative, into the science. So we have like 2 initiatives, which is Faith and Solar Initiative, pretty much what we do is we do solar assessments. So we do the science part. We educate the community about solar. What is this? What's the site? Is it feasible or not? We do the assessment. We do the measurements, and we've been successful in several installations, solar panels installations, by educating the community. But we include the spiritual aspect. That's where we come in. We talk about the power and the sacred of the light, and why that's important, that we as people of faith, we need to really embrace, we need to welcome and harness this gift, sacred gift, and into our congregations and lives. So that bonding between spirituality and science, we do it also with the faithful rainwater harvesting, where we educate the community about rainwaters, like about rain gardens, implementing them, bioswales, like doing some engineering work in their sites, on their sites, green roofs and on all that. But then why? Because water is sacred. We cannot waste water. We should like really respect it and honor it in the best way possible. So that's the way we contribute to it and have these connections between both faith and ecology and sustainability and healing. We always implement justice healing into the work, which is much needed. Yes.
For me, I totally agree that the collaboration between religion and science is really important. Solving the crisis requires both the how of science and the why of religions. As you mentioned, values in religious base that really show up. And not only that, kind of like spiritual motivations, community action, behavioral discipline, also from the religious side, but from the science, technology, data, innovation, also metrics from that side. Imagine I myself just pilot project to do this one, a pen which made from 7 cups of bottle. Imagine as a Buddhism monk, I only chant. It cannot be like this. But we got the help from science, machine, like many people who know the way to transform it. And not only that, one of our friends mentioned that he would like to transform his car park into solar panel, right? Like to create energy resources area. What if we can transform our temple, our mosque, our church as a learning center, connecting people, community, knowledge, and action to work on the environmental and climate crisis action. And from the science, I think to be able to handle, to support for not being sick, not being anxiety, not being burned out, the way of our religious various way that offer how and why they can live to like a better area. Yeah.
So Dekila, you asked about religion and science collaboration. My first thing I would say is let's not mix them up. I remember our friend Catherine Hayhoe, who's an evangelical climate scientist, when asked, do you believe in climate change? She says, absolutely not. It's not a belief. I'm a scientist. It's true, it's real, the science is there. It's not a belief. So the first thing is not mix up science and religion. The other thing I would say is that we are swimming, or I would say drowning, in a sea of disinformation. And so one of the most important things that we need to do is work together to get back to the truth. Truth is a very, I don't want to go too far about truth because truth is a, I'll just say scientific truth, okay? I don't know what to say about religious truth because that gets very, very strange in a hurry. So I think, so we need to get back to the truth. We need, wherever we are, scientists or religious leaders, faith leaders, we need to know the source of our information. We need to verify that we know where information is coming from. So that's towards getting back to the truth. And as a scientist, I will say a prayer, the serenity prayer, which says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Did not imagine that, Jonathan. You would recite a prayer.
Lord knows I need that prayer. So I would love to open this up and see if folks have questions. You might need to come up, or we might need to hand the mic around. I have a question as a backup, but if people have a question, I'd love for this to be an open interaction and dialogue.
So I have a question, and I want to just riff on what Jonathan was saying, because my question, when you asked the question, how do science and religion collaborate, it seems to me that we are swimming in disinformation. And whether we approach it differently, or I should say, even though we approach it differently, we still have a vested interest in truth and truthfulness. And it seems like we're really swimming in lies right now. And so how do we collaborate together to bring things to a point where we can understand we can discriminate between what is true and what's false and help people understand those differences? So, yeah, how do we collaborate? Anybody, how do we collaborate together on that?
Our evangelical communities struggle a lot with this problem right now. And so we feel a strong sense of responsibility to speak into our own communities and to help translate and bridge good science. And as another thing Dr. Heiho often says is that everybody is already the perfect person to care about these issues. They just have to understand how these issues connect to the values they already have. And so we do a lot of that work. And part of what we're trying to help our communities do is not be so afraid of the other or of difference. And so something that I find myself saying a lot within our communities is, all truth is God's truth. Reality is our friend. So we don't have to be afraid. If we come to our best understanding of something, it doesn't matter who came to that understanding or how widely it's shared. It's something that we should be engaging with.
What you said made me think. I think a lot of it comes from people being afraid. The creation of misinformation and the believing of it and the passing it along. And so I think all of our communities can give people some of the grounding you described, but there's a whole variety of groundings that might be the right thing for a different person to help them live with the fear and be willing to take in something new or something else.
For me, I in Thai we call ทำให้ดู which means lead by living, like lead by doing. So even something happen around, but you stand firm. So people around me receive this energy from you, and they will do their best.
Can I put your questions? For the context of the climate change, now the faith leaders and scientists such as this initiative, and there could be many others who are now coming together, explaining the climate change and what's happening and what's going on, what's the truth, reality from the science perspective, and from the religious, spiritual point of view, they have different explanations based on their own faith and traditions. As I'm just a religious person and I don't know much about science, what the religions or spirituality teaches us is just our own individual responsibility about everything around us. But now this knowledge, if it comes to the context of this climate crisis, now the damage has been so intense that now we don't have a time for individual influence from one to another. By the time it's reached to the world will be no more there. So when we think of this, sometimes it's quite intense. So I used to think that can't all of a scientist or religious person come up with one single kind of movement or resistance that all of us can put this united effort to make so that we're able to see the change because the damage is so intense. It's almost to the collapse. We are using the climate collapse here. So it's about to collapse. So we think that we don't have a time to sort of just explain. So there's a very one socialism quote that all the people before me has explained the world, but I have to be the one who changed the world. So my question is just that, is there any possibilities that we all come up together and just be a one single resistance, the effort, movement that we all put strength in it?
Sorry, you got it. Yeah, so it feels overwhelming. And I think what's really important to recognize is that there's not an either or, as you had mentioned. It's not either we individuals do something or the government changes. It's all of the above, that we as individuals can do things. But as Bill McKibben says, the best thing that an individual can do is be less of an individual and join groups and amplify your voice and understand that things need to change at a system level, and that means in the city, in the state. There's so much that you can do and that communities can do that can blossom up and expand. And we need, as the 1,000 points of light, that it can't just be, oh, that's the one thing that I should do. And in fact, industry wants you to think it's your problem. You're littering, you're driving too much, it's your fault. And so, we need to lead by example and ride our bikes to work and show that, but it's not our individual fault. We need to change at the system level. And so we need to do all of the above and also understand the opportunities. And, you can do one thing, like in urban planning, that can have knock-on effects and have huge benefits, especially in a city, that benefit many people. Like a bus rapid transit or one intervention can have multiple benefits. And just scientifically, reminder of where we are with energy. The cheapest way to generate electricity today is renewables and batteries. And so there are golden opportunities that are economically the right thing to do, health-wise right thing to do, and we don't have to wait for miracles. It's a matter of, voting, movement building, and getting the political will, because we're not waiting for solutions. They're already here.
Jonathan, to build off what you're saying too, I think and maybe here's a plug for the social and behavioral sciences, our understanding of how change has happened, how change happens, whether at an individual level or at scale, has advanced so much in recent decades. And some of the things we learn is that you don't have to change your mind to change your behavior. Sometimes you change your behavior and then your mind changes, right? So a lot of what we do at Arasha is we invite people to do the work of caring for creation, whatever they think of it, and then all of a sudden they're doing it and they go, oh wait, this is what you wanted me to do? This is great. I like this, and then your mind changes. And the other thing we've learned is we don't even need a majority of people to bring societal change, right? You don't need that many people, and we already have the vast majority of Americans cognitively on board with the issue. And so what we've started doing is we stopped spending so much of our time arguing with the people who are hardened skeptics, who are just looking for people willing to argue with them at length. We just go to the people who are on board but don't know what to do and are very open, and we help give them the tools and the community to get involved and take action. And then, as you know from social science theory, as that momentum builds, some of the laggards will start feeling like they're missing out, and they'll come along too, and then a few people might never come along, but then it's okay because we've moved.
Really briefly, Fletcher Harper invited me in 2018 to be a part of the, the Green March that we had in the Climate March in San Francisco, thank you. And the faith contingent ended up being the largest contingent in the march. But what really struck me is that while we walked down the street together, how very moved people were. And I think I'm just saying whatever is needed in this next dispensation, it's going to need us figuring out how to be together. I don't know if it's the creation of a sub-canon. I don't know if it's a creation of some language that we have together. But the world is in trouble today. And we are here together. And I think we must do some things now.
So for us, Wisconsin Green Muslims and Michigan Green Muslims, our strategy is to join efforts. Like, we don't do things alone. First, we cannot do things alone. Second, we found it is much, much, much better for us to join other efforts. So our strategy has been from the very beginning, join as many coalitions, networks, collaborations as we can on the local level, state, regional, with the Midwest, Great Lakes, and national. So that's how we contribute, we show solidarity to our issues that we care about. And in many of those issues, we are the only faith voice, as well as many, if it is a big Greens group, we are the only environmental justice group. But so we matter, our voice matters. And so we bring our chair to the table and find the spot, because there is no spot for us. We have been knocking on doors. No one invites us. We are the ones who keep knocking, and we say we want to have our voice there. We want to be participating because we care about climate, we care about water, we care about food, we care about clean air, we care about energy, just solar, all these issues we care about. So we want you to hear what our perspective is. So we've always been the only person in the coalition, but we care about being in a coalition, about issues that impacts our community. So that's our strategy, and has been working for us now for the 20 years. That's what we can do. Yeah, thank you.
We're right on time, which is we're out of time. But maybe we can close with one final question. And so,
Hello, I'm Jorge Weiss. I'm from the land of Lionel Messi. And we are learning you. And I'm asking me, when I hear you, we are in a trust transition, I guess. And I'm wondering how much has the science to do with this polarization too, but without the technological revolution, this polarization were impossible. And this continuous revolution has bring us today. Also, the extraction of the lithium from the batteries of the solar energy that destroys communities entire in Latin America. And I don't sure about this solution. I'm very careful to use this word as solution. I beg you, please, to be careful to this word, because solutions are in another way, in another place of life. And I'm wondering, we can, as churches, as religions, help in this transition to restore the trust, maybe the truth. The truth will change the trust, maybe too. But we need an actor here that is absent. What is happened with the politicians? They're caught in this polarization, needed the polarization to live. And while we are discussing how we better be friends, how understand us better, and create this transition, I embrace it, but we needed to think after all this discussion, we need to do all together that with our society, and the responsible for that. In our societies, democratic societies, are the politicians. How we are thinking this relation. I don't know if you can follow my argument, but I need to think with you. I don't have the answer, but I only share it. Thank you for all.
We need to have faith leaders running for office.
The question was around politicians and the role of politicians and how they are largely responsible for the polarization we're struggling with and the degradation of truth even as a concept. So I'm going to hand it back to all.
No, I'll just say it really, while we still can vote, this is the most important thing we can do. I voted today.
So I work for a grassroots organization, which means I go and talk to people and try to engage person by person in the questions, in decision-making questions, and in engaging people's minds and hands in the work that needs to be done. So that's the work I do, which means that I think that the solution to our political problem is actually to get people fully engaged. And that then the people will be out front and the politicians will be in the back saying, uh-oh, I better catch up, because there go my people. So I also think it is a polycrisis, and there are going to be multiple solutions evolving simultaneously. Just like a really healthy ecosystem has so many things growing at the same time, there are going to be so many solutions. There won't be a singular solution. And I do think that the people are just going to have to get out in front of the politicians. Yes, vote, but also do all the other parts of democracy as loudly as you can. And with your spiritual grounding, because then you're just unstoppable.
So I'm going to bring us to a close, and I just have a couple of thoughts in terms of closing. I think something that we are all describing and what we are experiencing, and just seeing your body movements, by the way, how you're leaning forward, leaning back as we're talking, something that's really becoming clear is all of us are aware that we are in crisis. Our societies are in crisis. We're all feeling this, right? These emotions are valid. We're experiencing heightened anxiety and distress, and that is valid because we recognize that there is an existential threat to our well-being and the well-being of our loved ones. So it's really important that we validate that emotion because we are experiencing also heightened sense of dissonance, right? Because we have to function in our day-to-day lives. Faith leaders are rarely allowed to be vulnerable in their communities. So, faith leaders, along with every one of us, all the rest of us, is also having to put aside the anxiety and distress all the time and just act like things are normal when they are not. So giving ourselves time and allowing ourselves to experience these emotions and validate them is so necessary for all of us in our societies. But coming back to the questions that 3 of our visiting faith leaders have talked about, it's really important too that we ground ourselves in the local. That is, rooting ourselves in the local means we will not get shaken. It means we will not get pulled off. It also means we are in the locus of control. We actually have more control around our local environment than at any other level of politics, of society, of global climate threat or environmental threat, right? And then finally, the last thing I'm going to say is something Jonathan and Ben and others have brought up, which is the importance of systems change. We are all part of systems. Whether it's our household, whether it's our church, whether it is the school, whether it is the department, whether it is, our medical system, right? Our education system, we are all participating in systems. And the most important thing we can do right now, in my opinion, is look at the systems we belong in and figure out how we're going to transform them. So the faith leaders that have visited, they're from 10 plus countries. We have faith leaders visiting with 31 faith leaders. Out of 42 faith leaders that took the course and were invited, we had 1/4 of our people couldn't come because of the policies in place. So we had people who were just eliminated from even applying for visas or who applied for them and couldn't get in because of the policies in place. But the faith leaders that did gather have gathered because they are trying to transform the systems that they all belong to. And the last thing I'm going to say is please take inspiration, take courage, be strengthened by the fact that this is happening. Faith leaders are doing this all around the planet. And you, science people, environmental, climate, social systems people, you're not alone, right? Because this dualism between religion and science came up so many times. That's an artificial one. We're all one. Thank you.